A man entered and asked if the aisle of silence had been cleared. I froze, glancing up from the register. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed unevenly, flickering in slow, erratic pulses. It was past midnight, the store nearly empty, aisles narrow and cramped, the scent of stale chips and disinfectant pressing into my nose. The aisle of what? I said, my voice catching. The aisle of silence, he repeated, casual, like we were discussing milk or bread. Has it been cleared for the night? I blinked. There was no aisle by that name, just canned goods, sodas, and the dull yellow of fluorescent lighting. I don't think we have an aisle called that, I said. He smiled faintly, a slow, knowing curl of his lips. Ah, of course. You're new. He stepped closer, and the air seemed heavier, as if the space around him resisted sound. It's always been here. You must clear it before the others arrive. I hesitated. Something about the way he said it, the certainty, made the hum of the lights feel louder and yet muffled at the edges. I shook my head. I'm the only one here tonight. I don't know what you mean. He nodded once, patiently, as if explaining to a child. Then he walked toward the far end of the store. I followed, half curious, half anxious. The aisle was the fifth from the right, between soda and canned soup. But as I approached, I realized the sound around it changed. The hum of the fluorescent lights dimmed, swallowed in the narrow space. Footsteps I had taken moments ago now felt faint, almost erased. My own breathing seemed distant, a whisper I could barely catch. Just clear it, the man said softly. He gestured at the space. Move anything you don't need. Make it ready. I shuffled cans, boxes, anything that looked misplaced. Each item I touched seemed heavier than it should, and when I set them aside, the sound of them hitting the floor faded instantly, leaving no echo, no imprint. I felt it then, a slight vertigo, as if my actions existed in a vacuum. The man watched silently, his eyes calm, almost approving. It listens, he said, absorbs everything it touches. Voices, footsteps, and memories. That's why it must be cleared. I laughed nervously. Absorbs memories? He didn't respond. His gaze shifted elsewhere, but I noticed something else, the reflection in the glass of the refrigerators. It didn't quite match. The aisle behind him stretched differently, deeper than possible, and shadows seemed to pool in impossible ways. I touched my own ear, realizing I could no longer hear the bell over the door when a customer entered earlier. I remembered it had jingled, but the sound itself had vanished. Even the low hum of the lights seemed to have lost a layer, a subtle vibration that anchored the space. See? The man said, his voice carried yet muffled. It grows if ignored. It swallows everything, and not just objects, not just noise. I stepped back, suddenly aware that the aisle was longer than it had been, stretching toward the back in ways that made the floor tilt at imperceptible angles. A can of beans I had just handled seemed to disappear entirely when I set it down, the memory of touching it dissolving as if it had never existed. I swallowed hard. My own name felt wrong in my mouth, like a word borrowed from someone else. I tried to call it aloud, but no sound came. My lips moved. My throat worked. Nothing emerged. The man's face remained calm. You're learning. Soon you'll understand what it takes to keep it contained. I looked at the aisle again. Its edges shimmered faintly, a distortion I hadn't noticed before, like heat rising over asphalt. Every step I took toward it seemed to stretch. I could not measure distance. The ceiling felt lower, the floor softer. I tried to back away. The narrow aisles seemed to press inward, as if the store itself had leaned closer. The fluorescent hum was now a distant vibration, and the subtle echo of my own footfalls was gone. Even my hands, when I clapped them, produced nothing. Silence had weight. It pressed into my chest, and a tremor ran through me. Clear it, the man said again, before it reaches the others. I ran my fingers along the shelves, searching for anything tangible, anything audible. Objects vanished under my touch. A box of cereal, a soda can, a receipt printed from the register I hadn't used. all dissolved into the quiet. My own memory of touching them fractured. The aisle stretched further, the space bending. I realized I could not see the back wall. The fluorescent lights flickered faster now, casting staccato shadows, each one momentarily revealing a depth that shouldn't exist. I tried to speak, to ask him what would happen if I failed. No sound emerged. My own voice was gone. The man nodded again, still patient. It remembers, and it waits. Everything lost becomes part of it. I felt a sudden vertigo, a spatial nausea. The aisle was expanding. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably. The neighboring aisles bent toward it, their shelves tilting inward. Labels shimmered, letters curling and rearranging themselves, describing things I could not recognize, events I could not recall, words I could not name. I backed into the counter. The cash register hummed faintly, but even that hum, that small mechanical reassurance, began to thin and vanish. My hands clutched the edge. The floor felt less firm, the lights more distant. I realized I had no idea how long I had been here, or even if I had been alone before the man arrived. He took a step closer. Not threatening, not menacing, just present. Soon you'll see, and then it will be perfect. Ready for the others. I wanted to flee, to grab the door handle, but the exit felt farther away than possible. The aisle loomed, stretching, swallowing the sound of my own heartbeat, the scrape of my shoes, the faint hum of fluorescent light. It wanted me to notice or not notice, to remember or forget. I tried to think of my name, of a word that had always been mine. It slipped, a soft fade at the edge of my mind. The aisle absorbed it instantly, leaving a hollow I could not identify. I turned to look at the man. His face was still calm. "Do not worry," he said. "It is patient, and so are we." The aisle stretched wider. The shelves leaned in, yet farther than physics should allow. The fluorescent lights pulsed once, twice, then steadied. Silence pressed into every corner of the store. I realized, with a cold certainty, that no sound I had ever made or ever would make might reach beyond that space. I stepped forward. Or maybe I did not. The aisle of silence waited. Empty, yet full. Its edges blurred with the rest of the store. The man had disappeared, or perhaps he had never been there. I do not remember calling my own name. I do not remember the bell over the door. I do not remember even speaking at all. And somewhere, deep in the narrow fluorescent glow, the aisle waited. The store's intercom whispered a countdown, but never said what it was for. It began just after midnight, when the aisles were empty and the fluorescent lights hummed in their usual uneasy rhythm. I was folding napkins behind the counter, the soft scrape of my fingers against paper the only sound I could claim as my own, when a voice slithered through the store. 10, it breathed. I froze. The intercom had never worked properly. Only static, a faint hum when it was tested during the day. Not words, not a number. 10. The sound was soft, deliberate, intimate. Not for a customer, not for anyone outside this store. It lingered close, brushing against my ears like a memory I had forgotten I had lost. I shook my head and went back to the napkins. But the voice persisted. 9. I glanced at the fluorescent lights. One flickered, then stuttered again. A slow pulse I hadn't noticed before. The aisles felt narrower, or maybe it was just me leaning forward, imagining it. My fingers brushed a can of soup, and it seemed colder than it should, heavier. The numbering didn't match anything I had done. I hadn't rung up 10 items. I hadn't spoken 10 words. Yet each number felt tailored, intimate, a countdown keyed to my own heartbeat. 8. I tried to recall why the lights flickered. Had they always done that? My memory of the store's layout began to warp. The cereal aisle appeared farther than I remembered. The soda machine somehow closer. Even the smell was different now. Stale coffee mixed with something sweet, almost like memory, almost like regret. 7. I noticed reflections in the glass doors of the refrigerators. Not mine exactly, but something like it. My head tilted, trying to see more clearly, and the reflection didn't quite follow. My eyes moved to the next aisle. A box of crackers shimmered, the label curling and twisting as if it knew I was watching. I tried to step closer. My foot hit the floor and there was no sound. No creak, no echo, no friction at all. The store swallowed it instantly. 6. I felt the air thicken, pressing against my chest. Each breath sounded muted in my ears, though I was sure I inhaled normally. My own name, usually clear and certain, felt wrong on my tongue, like a word borrowed from someone else. I opened my mouth to call it aloud. Nothing came. The intercom whispered on. 5. The lights dimmed further. Shadows pooled unnaturally, and the aisles seemed to shift subtly as I turned. A can I had placed on the counter moments ago was gone. I did not remember setting it down. Perhaps I had not. The store was rearranging itself around me, or my memory was unspooling faster than I could follow. 4. I tried to move toward the intercom. The hum of the fluorescent lights was thinner now, each flicker lingering too long in the corner of my vision. Even the bell over the door seemed to hesitate when it would normally jingle. It was as if the store itself had leaned in, aware, attentive, waiting for me to act or not act. 3. I pressed my palm against the counter, trying to anchor myself. The sensation was fleeting. The wood felt slippery, almost wet, though nothing was there. The soft, consistent vibration of the building beneath my feet faded. I realized the space had changed. The aisles stretched beyond reason, bending into angles I could not map. Each turn felt longer, and I had the creeping certainty that I had walked the store 10 minutes ago, yet I could not recall where the back wall had been. 2. The voice softened, almost intimate, not counting for the world, only for me. I felt my own memories slipping, small things first. The sound of my mother's voice when I was 7, the ringtone I used to wake up to, the taste of my last cup of coffee, vanished, erased. I could sense them had existed, but I could not recall them with clarity. The countdown was taking pieces of me as it went. 1. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, then steadied. The aisles, stretched and bent, seemed to pulse, expand, contract, subtly alive. I tried to run toward the door, toward any sound that might guide me. But the air resisted. My steps made no noise. Even my voice, when I screamed, vanished into the hum of the building. 0. The store exhaled. I felt it through my chest, a subtle pressure that rolled through my spine. The lights flickered one final time, casting every aisle in a wavering, fluid shadow. The intercom whispered again, a single word I could not place, and yet it resonated deep within me, inside memory and thought alike. I realized I did not know what had happened. I could not recall whether the numbers were counting to something new, or if I had been dissolving into the space all along. The shelves were static, yet different. The refrigerators were still, yet stretching, waiting. My reflection in the glass did not quite match my body, a subtle wrongness at the edges. I touched my face. Did it respond? I could not be certain. My own name felt like someone else's secret, a sound I had never spoken. The countdown had ended, but the store had not. It remembered me, and I, in some small but irreversible way, had changed. I turned toward the door, or perhaps I did not. The aisles seemed endless, still pulsing faintly with that whispering voice, waiting for the next number to drop. I could not speak. I could not remember speaking. Perhaps I had never spoken at all. The intercom remained silent now, yet I knew it was still counting. For me.